support we're seeing on the ground is nothing short of incredible. We've been traveling the state, and every place we've gone, there's an energy, there's an enthusiasm. What we're seeing is conservatives coming together, conservatives uniting behind this campaign. And that's the key to winning. If conservatives stand as one, if we're not divided, that's how we win the primary. And if conservatives stand together for principle, that's how we win the general. And in that spirit, I'm very pleased today with the news that just broke a few moments ago, which is that I have been endorsed by Iowa Congressman Steve King for president. Steve King is a good friend. Steve King is a ferocious defender of the Constitution. He is a ferocious defender of American sovereignty, and no one has fought harder against amnesty than Steve King. No one has fought harder to secure our borders than Steve King has. No one has fought harder to stop Obamacare than Steve King has. And the reason Steve is endorsing me today, and as we speak he is at a press conference in Iowa announcing that endorsement, is that Steve and I have been in the foxholes, in the trenches, fighting these fights side by side, leading the fight to stop Obamacare, leading the fight to stop amnesty, leading the fight to secure the borders, leading the fight to stop Planned Parenthood, leading the fight to get back to our Constitution. This is what the men and women of South Carolina are looking for. It's what Americans across this country are looking for, principled conservatives. And Steve King today endorsing our campaign is yet another sign that conservatives continue to unite behind our campaign.
Senator, how big an impact is this politically in Iowa? I mean, obviously this is one of the two big prize endorsements. You're also quoting Bob Vanderplatz this weekend. Where does this kind of position you in terms of igniting your Iowa campaign, which is solid but still kind of third place?
Well, our team in Iowa is tremendously strong in terms of the foundation. We're the only campaign that has announced county chairman in all 171 counties in each of the first 4 states: Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina, Nevada. We've got an incredible national team. We've got over 77,000 volunteers. These aren't people who signed up just to support. These are people who have volunteered to work, to knock on doors, to send emails, to make phone calls. That's the strength of the campaign. You know, when it comes to Iowa, Iowa is an organizational battle. It's a grassroots battle. It's about getting people to show up on a cold February night to go and caucus for you. And I believe the team we have on the ground is tremendously strong. There's no doubt Steve King's support will have enormous influence. There are few, if any, conservatives more trusted in the state of Iowa than Steve King is. And the fact that he can say, as he is saying to the people of Iowa, that I know Ted, I've been under fire. You know who someone is, not in good times, but in bad times, when they're being attacked, when they're going through the battles that matter. That's when character comes up. And so I think it is tremendously helpful in Iowa to continue our momentum. But I also think it has an impact far beyond Iowa. It has an impact here in South Carolina. Historically, the Washington moderates, their plan has been to divide conservatives. They want conservatives splintered. And they don't really care how we're splintered. They just want a chunk of conservatives over here, a chunk of evangelicals over here, a chunk of libertarians over here, a chunk of Tea Party folks over here. That's how, in past elections, the Washington moderate establishment candidate has run up the middle with 23% of the vote, won the nomination, and then they go on to lose the general because millions of people stay home. The central question in this primary is whether conservatives will unite. And every day we see conservatives uniting more and more. Once conservatives unite, it's game over. The primary is over once conservatives unite, and I think Steve King standing up. Steve King is a congressman who's earned respect, not just in Iowa, but in South Carolina and all across the country, as someone who fights and tells the truth and is willing to stand up for our principles, and I think that's what we need right now.
Senator, in Turkey today, the president called religious tests for refugees shameful. Can you respond to that? And you outlined what you plan to do in Washington this week.
Well, you know, it is one of the saddest things we've seen for 7 years, that President Obama has consistently abandoned and alienated our friends and allies, and has coddled and appeased our enemies. And that is never more true than with radical Islamic terrorism. It is striking that after 7 years, President Obama refuses to utter the words radical Islamic terrorism. Instead, he stands up and says to the contrary, the Islamic State, he says, is not Islamic. Well, that sure would come as a surprise to them. That's not what they say. And there's a consequence to being unwilling to define what it is we're fighting. Both President Obama and Hillary Clinton want to define the enemy as some sort of abstract and ill-defined violent extremism. That means they cannot direct a strategy to defeat it because they don't acknowledge who they're fighting. One manifestation. In my home state of Texas over 5 years ago, the terrorist attack that occurred in Fort Hood. When Nidal Hassan walked through Fort Hood yelling Aloha Akbar as he murdered 14 innocent souls, the Obama administration refused to acknowledge that that was terrorism. They called it, quote, workplace violence. One of the things I am most proud of my tenure in the Senate was introducing the legislation that passed in December of last year to mandate that the Purple Heart be awarded to those who were murdered by Nidal Hassan. We passed that over the active opposition of the Obama Pentagon because they wouldn't acknowledge that it was Islamic terrorism, even though Nidal Hassan had communicated with Anwar al-Awlaki, an Islamic cleric, and asked about the permissibility of waging jihad against fellow servicemen. Nonetheless, because the Obama administration doesn't acknowledge Islamic terrorism, it wouldn't fight against it. Likewise, we've seen when it comes to foreign policy. You know, the president is loath to use meaningful force against ISIS. There is a reason why ISIS believes it's winning, because President Obama is engaged in what I call photo-op foreign policy. To put it in perspective, in the first Persian Gulf War, there were roughly 1,100 air attacks a day that we launched. It was overwhelming air power. Right now, Obama's launching between 15 and 30 air attacks a day. It's a pinprick here. It's there for CNN, but it doesn't actually do anything to stop ISIS. And it's because this president is unwilling to lead as a commander-in-chief against an enemy that has declared war and intends to bring jihad to America. Now, I will note, where the president has been willing to use military force is in ways that have helped radical Islamic terrorists. So, for example, in Libya, President Obama and Hillary Clinton led the NATO expedition in toppling Gaddafi. Now, Gaddafi was a deeply flawed dictator, but he was someone who had handed over his nuclear program altogether to America. He's someone who was cooperating with us in going after radical Islamic terrorists, was handing terrorists over to America, and instead, President Obama and Hillary Clinton led the effort to topple Gaddafi, and the result is Libya is now a lawless war zone governed by battling radical Islamic terrorists. The 4 deaths in Benghazi are the direct result of the failed Obama-Clinton foreign policy. And I would note, they did the very same thing in Egypt. Likewise, in Egypt, President Obama and Hillary Clinton opposed President Mubarak. Again, a flawed dictator with serious human rights problems, but someone who had been a consistent ally of the United States for decades. And instead, the Obama administration pressed to topple Mubarak and to hand control of Egypt over to the Muslim Brotherhood, which funds radical Islamic terrorists across the globe. Indeed, right now today, President Obama is celebrating this catastrophic Iranian nuclear deal, which, if this goes forward as he intends, will result in over $100 billion going to Iran. That money will go directly to Hamas and to Hezbollah, to the Houthis, and to other radical Islamic terrorists. Billions of those dollars will go. The result of this deal is the Obama administration will become quite literally the world's leading financier of radical Islamic terrorism. When you give billions to the leading state sponsor of terrorism, you're responsible for the deaths that the money you sent to them caused. And so it doesn't surprise me at all that President Obama is saying in Europe today, pay no attention to these radical Islamic terrorism. We can't look to the nature of what it is we're fighting. That is why America is so vulnerable. And you just have to ask any American in the street, in light of what happened in Paris, does President Obama and Hillary Clinton's plan to bring in tens of thousands of Syrian Muslim refugees to America, to settle them here, where among them could well be ISIS terrorists waging jihad and murdering Americans? And I think virtually anybody, and it actually doesn't matter, you can ask Republicans, Democrats, Independents, Libertarians, anyone with an ounce of common sense would say no. We shouldn't be bringing in tens of thousands of Syrian Muslim refugees. Instead, we should be resettling them humanely in Middle Eastern countries that are majority Muslim. We can help them deal with their refugee status, but the first obligation of the president needs to be as commander-in-chief to protect the safety of the United States of America.
All right, last question.
What are you going to do in Washington?
Why was it important for you to come to the Sun City Hilton Head community today?
Well, I'm thrilled to be here at Sun City. It's a wonderful, vibrant community. You know, the men and women here are passionate about this country. They're passionate about freedom. I'll tell you, the energy, the excitement, the support we're seeing here on the ground in Sun City is so encouraged. Sun City is critical to winning the state of South Carolina. It is a community that is vibrant and energized and focused and informed on the challenges facing this country. And South Carolina, in turn, is critical for the Republican nomination. You know, historically, South Carolina has played a tremendously important role in the Republican nominating contest, which is that South Carolina helps ensure that the next Republican nominee is a true conservative. Our support on the ground in South Carolina is extraordinary. It's growing every day as we're seeing conservatives unite. And I think the team we have in Sun City, it's breathtaking, the energy we have, and it's really humbling. I am honored to stand with so many tremendous men and women who love this country and who love their kids and grandkids. And I think everyone here is committed to wanting to leave a better nation, a better country to the next generation than we receive. That's what our parents did for us. They gave us a better nation, a better future. If we continue on the path we're on, we won't do that to our kids. The reason why we had a packed house and an overflow crowd out into the backyard is precisely because there's so many men and women here who are committed. We will do the same. We will reignite the promise of America. We will give a better future to the next generation.